Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's Grant Cameron, and I have a good friend of mine on today, a guest, Neil Gaur, who I've been with a number of times. He runs conferences. He'll get into what he does, why it's important, and why I love him. And at the very end, if you are going to stick around, you need to, or if you can't stick around, at least replay the end, because Neil's going to do some poetry for us. And I, two things in school I hated. One was poetry, but I love Neil Gaur's poetry. And the other one I hated was Shakespeare. And I now basically quote the famous line from Shakespeare: "All the world's a stage, all the men and women, aliens and angels are but actors. They have their entrances and exits, and each man plays many roles." And I came to suddenly realize that maybe Shakespeare knew something that we're just starting to discover now. Welcome, Neil, from California, correct? You're still in California?
Thanks, brother. I'm actually in Yucatan right now, Mexico.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I've been here for 4 months.
Wow. Is that, tell me why that is. What's going on there?
So, well, I love this area. I love Playa del Carmen area and just the Mayan pyramids. So I've been coming down here every year for the last 5 years and filming ancient sites and creating documentaries for Portal to Ascension YouTube. So this time, because of all the craziness going on in the US and all the restrictions in California, I decided to come to a place where I'm in paradise, and there's a lot more open people with less restrictions. So I've been here, but by the time I leave, I would have been here for 6 months, coming back in like a month.
I was actually in Playa del Carmen. It was I tell you a weird little funny story. I mean, if you've ever heard it. I went to on a cruise, and we were supposed to go into the place across the channel there, but they had the big hurricane there. Okay. And so the whole thing was wiped out. So we went into Playa del Carmen, and we got off the cruise ship, went on the dock there, and came to the resort there. And I'm sitting there all of a sudden here, Grant. I go, what? And I look, and I worked at the University of Manitoba, and this was the head carpenter, and his name is Swan. He says, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "What are you doing here?" I couldn't believe it, come to Mexico. And then so we chatted, and so we came back, and I thought it was kind of weird that you'd meet somebody in Mexico that's hilarious. From Canada, the same place. So about a year later, he comes up, he says, "I saw you in Mexico again." I said, "I wasn't in Mexico." He said, "Yeah, you were." And I had done with Jaime Maussan, had done an interview with me, and it was playing on Mexican TV. So he was at the resort the second year.
Wow.
There, and he's like, "You're in Mexico again." So I'm familiar with Playa del Carmen, and it's a beautiful area.
How long ago was that you were down here?
Oh, that's going back. So I've been retired 10 years. So that's probably 12 years ago. It was when the big hurricane took place, right after.
Yeah. So that was probably Cozumel, right? That you were going to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of weird to see the power of nature to take out that concrete deck, the dock. I couldn't believe it, because the ship went by it. You could see it. And it was just amazing. I just couldn't believe how much damage was done there.
Wow. Yeah, it's so beautiful here. And then I like to go to the beach, walk to the beach, and then I go to different ancient sites and pyramids. And every year they're actually finding new things here, because so much is underneath all the trees in the jungle. Now they have LiDAR technology. So literally, like, every year they're finding a new city in the jungle. So it's constant content for me to explore.
And you're doing that on your Portal to Ascension YouTube channel?
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about your organization, what you do, and where people can find your stuff if they want to look this up.
So Portal to Ascension, I'll just skip to right when it was created. In 2008, I created Portal to Ascension. I had it as an online group for 2 years before that. It was called 2012 Consciousness, Mind Evolution, and Presence. And then in 2006, it was a Facebook group. Thousands of people started joining the group. So after a series of shifts in my own consciousness and my own perspective, from going from conspiracy theorists, conspiracy factualists, let's say, to spiritual and realizing the bigger picture, in 2008, I had a shift in which had a dream to change the name to Portal to Ascension. And then I changed the name, and I started doing small events. I started with meditation events, sound healing events, hypnosis events to unlock creative potential. And then by 2009, 2010, I went on a few international tours to Canada down to San Diego, doing events on sound healing, doing meditation events. But then in 2010, I did my first all-day Ancient Alien conference, because I was into extraterrestrials for like 8 years. my first introduction to this information was the Sumerian tablets. So I was into ancient alien information. So I called on a few people that, colleagues, people that we know in the circuit. And in 2010, I did an all-day Ancient Aliens conference. And from then onwards, like until 2012, I continued doing that, small events, and then one larger conference until 2012, where I did Cosmic Reunion 2012 in November 2012, and then Cosmic Reunion Fourth Density in March. And those are the 2 3-day conferences, kind of like the Portal to Ascension conference that you came to, just call something else. Bashar was the headline at the first one. And it was me experimenting with all the people that had joined these Facebook groups. I wanted to see if I could create an event, fly out all these speakers, and if people would show up. So that was the milestone in 2012 for Portal to Ascension. And then I just continued doing bigger and bigger productions until 2015, where I created the online university that you're familiar with since you spoke on it so many times. And then in 2015, started with 1 event a month. And then in 2018, it's been 110 events a year now at this point. And basically every topic I've had the opportunity to think about that I wanted to learn about, or that I have thought about, but I haven't created an event yet, I either have done an event on, or I have it in the pipeline over the next few years. So we explore a lot of information. I would say around half of the information is deep dives into ancient history, but kind of redefining our timeline. What is our true world history? Where do we come from? What were the lies and manipulations in our history that took us away from the truth of ancient civilizations? But that directly connects to the extraterrestrial question. It also connects to our spirituality, because when you look at these ancient civilizations, all of a sudden you see that they had an advanced awareness of quantum energy, right? And they also had an advanced awareness of spiritual consciousness. And besides that, UFOs and everything has always been close to my heart, disclosing the truth of the extraterrestrial presence. So now I just curate and cultivate all these events every single year, going deep into topics that can really help expand people's consciousness and empower them to realize the beauty of who we are and how we can live in harmony with ourselves and the planet. And that's all at portaltoascension.org, and also on my YouTube, youtube.com/portaltoascension.
And you have a lot of people when you do your 3-day events online, or whether you're doing them, you have like 40 people. So how do you know so many people? I mean, do you read? I mean, how do you? It seems like that I learned a lot of the people that you had. I didn't know about them until I saw them on your site. So
I'm always researching, right? So from 2000 to 2008, I didn't do any events. I was just researching, reading, and going to events. So I made all these friends and connections, and I would go up to speakers and ask for their emails and even some of their numbers. And then sometimes I would have dinner with them at the events. And so then they would recommend other people. So by the time 2008 hit, I knew a lot of people that were doing this information, and I just started reaching out to them. When I first got into doing events, I was really heavily into channeling, and then I became more into research-oriented information and started going to conferences like UFO events, ancient history summits, things like that. But I also have a part, because Portal to Ascension, we're pretty much like a full-on conscious event production company. So part of that is a constant researching of new speakers. So I don't want to keep having the same people over and over. So when I do big events like that, it gives me an opportunity to do a lot of research and bring on new people that I want to interview, so I can get a feel for them to see if I want to put them into another event, maybe a paid event or an all-day summit or something like that. And now for the last 5 years, because I've been doing so much, I have all types of people contacting me to be speakers, and they send me their books, they send me their videos. So there's a constant research going on. I even have individuals working for me that if I can't research them, they'll read the book or they'll watch the videos and then give me a summary on it. Just because I want to, Portal to Ascension, the mission for us is not only to get this awareness out, but to give people a voice that are doing this work, so that they can get their awareness out. So we're constantly asking for new people to come in and showcase the information on our platform.
Wow. We'll get to your upcoming events, but I want to go back to pyramids. You mentioned pyramids. Have you watched the discussions I've been having with Jimmy Blanchette? Do you know Jimmy Blanchette?
I've heard of him, but I haven't watched your discussions. No, tell me.
Oh, okay. Because he basically, he has he uses the 144 frequency. He's a radio guy he's originally from Quebec, Canada. Okay. Moved to California, had his radio license when he was 12 years old, and started bouncing signals off the moon and stuff like this. He got this massive array, and then decided he was going to send out a message, and suddenly got back a message and started this whole non-human intelligence conversation. And so it started with him, and they had these radio technology. When I wrote Contact Modalities, I knew they had this radio technology, and he would have this thing where you would use these little 8-watt radios, and they would get, put them on 144, and one of the radios would go off and it would start to chatter, and the other should be going off because they're all on the same frequency. Yeah. So he developed this whole sort of technology, and I've sort of followed him. I've done a number of interviews with him, and he has, I think, I always say to him when I interview him, he's like Albert Einstein. It's like, you think you're talking, he's the smartest guy I've ever seen in my life. Wow. And his thing's unraveling. And now he goes to the pyramids. So it's the connection of all the ancient sites. The last one, I'll send you the video that we did with the last one with him, where he takes all the ancient sites around the world and he links it in, and he shows the mathematics behind this. It's unbelievable. How he linked all the stuff together. And then we put him together with Gary Oldham from the Rendlesham Forest. He had the whole thing with the Rendlesham message, and that all links into the pyramids as well. Wow. And then the third person is Sarah Cosme. I don't know if she was speaking at Paul's event a couple months ago, been on Gaia a few times. And she's a QHHT practitioner, actually a level 3. She's one of there was only 12 when she got it. She actually helps them train the QHHT. She's been around the world and stuff. And she started writing this book. She had the experience that Dolores Cannon had. You remember the one with Nostradamus, where she's got this client, and Nostradamus is talking, and then the client moves to Alaska. She says, oh, that game's over. And next client walks in, continues the story. Next client walks in, tells the story. And Sarah had the same story, but it had to do with Atlantis. So these people started coming in one after another, and they're telling the story about Atlantis. Yeah. And her last one was on the Sphinx, where the woman comes in and she starts talking about the Sphinx. So suddenly we've got these 3 people, and I'm interviewing these people, and they're all connected. We put them together on email, where they're all on this thing where they've got this mathematical connection. And basically the idea sort of comes down is that we're being given this sort of message. And it's not like everybody thinks there's going to be an ET message where it says, hey, we're going to land on the White House lawn and we're going to eat you or whatever, a left brain message. And it's not. It's like the message in Contact, where it says really heavy mathematical thing where you got to figure it out. And Jimmy Blanchette's even got it down to, he can actually determine with his mathematics the distance to the planets. All the planets are actually at the right distance according to his mathematics, and the speed of the galaxies. And he goes through this whole thing. It's just, and you're just like, how do you come up with this stuff? Unbelievable. So if you're ever going to do one on pyramids, those are the people.
Well, I'll send you. I do an annual conference called the Pyramid Knowledge Conference. It's my second year of doing it. So I would love to connect with him, actually.
Yeah, I'll send you some of the material. We actually did one with Gary as well and he sort of gave up because he had done he did the book with Peniston on the whole message about the 7 points around the earth and stuff like that. And it was, when you've read the end of the Rendlesham Enigma, it's all this mathematics, and your eyes will sort of roll back, and you can tell this, the size of the pyramid and which way it's facing, and how it's linked with everything else in the world and these 7 sites and stuff. And so he sort of gave up because it was very hard to explain because there's so much mathematics. Well, Jimmy's is the same sort of thing. It's like the thing from Contact, the message, where you got to sit there and you got to figure it out. And as you unravel it, it becomes more. And Gary said he's actually got 2 more books just on the mathematics of that message that Jim Peniston got by putting his hand on the craft at Rendlesham Forest. Wow. And you see there's this weird contact, but it all links back into the pyramids, which I never really paid any attention to. I figured it's pretty weird, and they probably had some stuff, whatever, but how does it link into UFOs? Now I'm seeing that they're basically showing this link to the pyramids and to all the ancient sites. When Jimmy did the last one with all the ancient sites, your mouth is hanging open. And then we have the synchronicities when Nicole Sackage and I were doing it. So Nicole was running it on her channel. And then when we looked at the channel, when we were running it, she had 1,440 subscribers, which is 144. Yeah. And then Jimmy sends me the message in my thing, and he says, look at this. And he was putting the 144th message in my file on the same day. So
that's crazy.
You see this stuff and you go like, wow, this is pretty weird.
Yeah. That's amazing. So I just did a presentation. I did a deep dive research study into Pythagoras and his life. So I did a 4-hour presentation on Portal to Ascension recently. And part of it was to really dissect who he was as an individual, but where he got his information from, right? Because we say Pythagorean theorem, we give him all this credit, right? Yeah. And firstly, so a lot of people really have kind of an anger towards Pythagoras because they're like, well, he didn't find out all this information, so why did he say it was his? Well, firstly, he never said that it was his information. He actually said where he got the information from. And his followers that came after him after he died were the only ones that said it was from him. Kind of like Jesus. Jesus spoke about everywhere he went, but then when he died, people were like, oh, it's all Jesus' information. So as I was dissecting it and looking at where Pythagoras got his information from, it took me to ancient India, it took me to Babylon, and the Pythagorean theorem literally written in Babylonian text, and to the pyramids of Egypt. And so I did this whole deep dive, like maybe an hour of that presentation was specifically the mathematics of Egypt and showing about not only how many stones are in one pyramid, but if you were to align the pyramids next to each other, what it would create. Like if you get the 3 pyramids on the Giza Plateau and you line them up 1, 2, 3, right, just next to each other, it's the Pythagorean theorem. It's the exact Pythagoras a squared plus b squared equals c squared. If you go to the Temple of Siren and you look at the distance from the Siren to the Great Pyramid, and then a specific equinoxes like summer solstice and equinox and so on and so forth, and then you divide it by 432, which is another number you get within the circumference of the pyramid, you get the circumference of Earth. You know, so it was almost like Egypt, like honestly, seems to be a mathematical layout of all the information we need to rebuild society in case there is a wipeout of everything, like all the equations, all the mathematics to create it. So when he took this information, then his information was then hijacked by the occultist secret societies, and then they utilize his information in order to create societies and civilization as we know it, including how we create bridges, how we create arches. But all of this came from pyramid technology and the mathematics of how these were created, including, let me say one more thing, the pyramid, the angle of the pyramid is actually the same angle as the tilt of Earth, 23.5 degrees, which is another like amazing thing. How did they know this information? Were they spiritually connected? Was it extraterrestrials that gave this information? Was it a past civilization like Atlantis that passed it down? No matter which way you look at it, it's something profound, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is what Gary brings that up to 23.5, which when I saw it, I said, holy cow, that's a triple harmonic triple Schumann's resonance. And if you're familiar with the Bankston healing, when a person goes into healing, when they put the brain scan on and they realize there's a triple harmonic, a 7.8, a 15, and then the 23, and that the brains of the person being healed and the healer go into sync, and they've actually got this on tape. They actually go into this synchronicity at one point when the person is being healed. So 23.5, and Jimmy gets into that as well, the diameter of the Earth and stuff. And it's almost like mathematics. Like people describe mathematics as sort of like the everything's built on mathematics, but mathematics is just symbolic of this very finely tuned universe that when you break it all down, all the formulas are going to be very short and simple, because it's just showing these relationships, that everything is not a random world like we think it is. It's very carefully tuned, and people are starting to pick this up. So maybe you can you even have these people on for,
I would love to. Well, you just said a really great word, because you said mathematics, but then you said tuned, because the musical intervals, tuning, and mathematical intervals are one and the same. So the mathematics is like is looking at it from the masculine based linear world, right? And then the music is looking at it from more of a secular nature. No one is better than the other. It's just like a feminine way and a masculine way to look at the same thing, which is why it's called universe. It's one verse, it's one frequency, one song,
And Jimmy got that as well. Like he decoded one of the messages coming back, because that's the first thing you think when you hear these messages coming across the radio is like, well, what are they saying? Because he'll send a signal. He's learned to make it into take a photograph or something and put it into an audio signal and send it out on his big set in California there. And but when it came back, he decoded the one, and it had 8 tones. And as soon as I saw that, I said, 8 tones, that's like a musical scale. I mean, and you see all these connections where it's just one synchronicity after another. And he's got the other one where he actually they have these little chirps that come across. And then he had he mentions a very famous writer was at his place in California, and he was saying they had an encounter with a being, and he said to this guy said to the being, he said, how do we decode this message? How do we code Jimmy's message? And he said, slow it down as much as you can. And that's the contact thing. That's how they did the contact thing, the message. It's like you're listening to the message, but you don't realize. So Jimmy's decoded one of these messages, and now he's working on trying to decode this other message with these chirps. Whoa. And he actually shows them at a very slow speed. And you can actually see that each chirp is different. The peaks and the valleys are different on each chirp. And so it's got a lot of information. We just haven't figured out what this message is telling us.
Okay, so he decoded one of them. So
yep.
What does it say?
Well, it has these 8 tones. That's what it is. It's eight tones that come across. And so he takes the 8 tones, and then he starts using the mathematics of the 8 tones. He multiplies one against the other, gets the speed of light. He multiplies one against the other, the diameter of the earth, and all these tones, and they're all linked. When you start looking at all these tones, it explains everything in the universe, all these tones. And when I'll send you the videos, and you can check this out, because it's every time I see him, I say, like, man, this is like talking to Einstein. It's like watching history being written. That and so they would get in, maybe ask you this question. It comes into this thing about inspiration. Yeah. I mean, you talked about this where you've had these inspirations where you're told, what the name of the channel will be. I wrote Contact Modalities, and I believe very strongly in that. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that, about this idea that we think we're the smart guys, we're figuring this stuff out, and we are actually getting help.
Yeah. Well, a great example of that is when you look at ancient history and you look at specific times when great minds were on the planet. There were multiple great minds all around the planet that had the same kind of ideas. Like Pythagoras' time, well, there was like 4 other people on the planet, including Buddha, that all had same ideas of reincarnation, right? So that goes to the whole thing of maybe this information's in the ethers, and it could be multiple things, not only the cycles of time, the evolution of consciousness, the devolution, the position of our solar system in the galaxy, the frequencies coming from the central sun, the black hole in the center. All of these can contribute to different levels of information and awareness being, in the field around us. So I feel that when we get to certain levels, it's a collective download that we can all tap into. And another great example would be, let's talk about Pythagoras for one more second. Pythagoras was into consciousness and spirituality and vibration being God and mathematics being God. Then Christianity came along. Christianity started hijacking his information, and the Knights Templar and the secret societies were the only ones that utilized it. And then Kepler and Galileo came along that were anti-church and anti-spirituality because of what they'd done. So they were neo-Pythagoreans without the spirituality, right? But they all happened around the same time, but they were atheist about it. And then all of a sudden we get to 1900, which is technically the end of the Kali Yuga, the Dark Ages, and the beginning of the Energy Age, which is the Dwapara Yuga, the Bronze Age. And then all of a sudden we have Max Planck, Tesla, and Einstein, all individuals that helped us understand the quantum reality, but all spiritual consciousness, right? And happening separate from each other. Even with Tesla, there was another individual that had the same equations that Tesla was coming up with on the other side of the planet, but was only a few days off from publishing it, So there's definitely a collective download that we receive. So for me, when the whole download for Portal to Ascension came in 2008, it was like a 20-year package, like in one. Marketing plans, business plans, how many events I'm going to do, what's the eventual goal, what's going to happen. And I'm a skeptic at heart. It takes a lot for me to even realize that. It took me a good decade, maybe till 2018, until I finally owned that actually even happened to me, right? But the more that I'm owning that is actually happening, I'm getting this direct download of it, the more I'm able to implement it with comfort and ease and flow right into it. So I feel that I'm constantly getting these downloads, and it's just basically levels of awareness that I'm tapping into in order to give me the tools that I need so I can create what really needs to be created right now for the planet.
So you would believe in mission then, in terms of your being here at this time, this place for some particular mission?
Yeah, I feel that is the case, but I'm also very much into the paradox that even just being and not having a specific mission of what you do is also part of the mission, because I feel that source, right, wanted to experience itself infinite experience. And a good experience or a bad experience is still just an experience in the scheme of source, right? So no matter what you are, what you do, whether you're working at a 9-to-5 job, or if you're doing something actively like this, in the grand scheme of the singularity of the oneness, you're doing exactly what you need to do. Now, because we're going through this cycle of awareness and this ascension, a lot of individuals are incarnating to play the role for this awakening. And that's part of my mission on this planet. And this kind of goes back to Dolores Cannon's information of when there was a call out to the universe, she said, after the first nuclear bomb test, right? The splitting of the atoms started affecting all types of different realms. And then there was a call out to the universe. And the call out was, these people are going to destroy themselves, and they could even destroy other beings in other dimensions unless you incarnate onto this planet. So I really subscribe to that kind of information, that a lot of people started coming here on the planet to take an active role in helping us move away from a destructive nature and start helping us move towards being in harmony with nature.
So how do you see it? I mean, we have this, war going on now. I mean, are you optimistic, or how do you see it unfolding?
I like to say I'm a hopeless hopeful. No matter what happens, I cannot help but be hopeful. When I see chaos, I see opportunity. When I see struggle, I see the ability to learn from our lessons. When I see darkness, I see the contrast we need to achieve the light. So right now, since there is a lot of traumas on this planet, collective traumas, past life traumas, a lot of power and greed, these things can't sustain our experience on this planet anymore. So part of that is not going to just be roses and unicorns, as they say, right? We're going to probably see a lot of darkness before we see the light. And hopefully it's not in a way where there's mass deaths or anything, and that we can do it from more of a harmonic perspective of self-realization. But I don't really know how it's going to look. So when I see all of this stuff happening in the world right now, people having the opportunity to really reflect on what they really want and how they want to live. So with this war and everything, even though I see it and I'm looking at it neutrally to see what's going to actually occur from this, I do believe that the eventual goal is going to be the ascension of humanity. And the reason why I believe that is not only because of my own intuition and my own feeling, but also looking at all the ancient scriptures that talk about this time. Many different cultures have all talked about the resurrection of the Messiah within us, and if you look at the cycles of time, like the golden age and all that every ancient pre-Noah's flood civilization had within their text, they all talk about these cycles. And there's only one civilization that actually had the dates, and that's the Indian civilization that had the dates of these shifts. And in between, if you look at the cycle and the dates on this calendar that they have, you can look at exactly what happened at those specific dates. And it's almost like something huge occurred at those times. So what happens at the end of the Kali Yuga and the beginning of the next Yuga is a period of wars, right? And the Kali Yuga ended in 1900, and it fully ends by the end of this century. And we're having all these great wars. So I feel a part of this is just the process that we're going through in order to really realize what we want. One thing I'm hopeful for is that we used to exist in a world where we were in this world of hierarchy and authority, where we'd give up our power to authority. We lived in this hierarchical reality. We've now stepped into a world of sovereignty and individuality. And part of that, I feel, will make it that we have the freedom of our own consciousness enough to not be completely controlled and go down a pathway that is for the hierarchical structure, for the authority structures, like we've been doing for the last thousands of years. So to answer your question more concisely, I'm extremely hopeful. I feel that eventually, I don't know how long it's going to take, 5 years, 10 years, 100 years, but I feel that we're on this upturn in consciousness.
Yeah. Have you ever had Paul Selig speak for your?
You mentioned him at our last event, and I connected with him on Instagram, and now I'm going to have him this year sometime because of
because he talks about the fact that in order to have the shift, you have to, all that's been built in fear has to be raised to the surface. It's like, lifting the rock and the little creeper crawlers come out, that you can't, people are almost like they're what would be the word? They're not proactive, they're reactive. So It's not until something happens to you do you learn the lesson. Until then, everybody's just going. Let me ask you a question about, you talk about sovereignty and individual. How do you break that from ego, where we have a situation where, like I always describe it as a football game, where, when you're in a huddle and you're playing in the Super Bowl, when the 10 players are all on the same page and we're going to go. But when you got 5 guys inside the huddle who've got their middle finger up and saying, don't tell me what to do, I'm an individual. How do you separate individuality from the moving together as one?
That's such a good question, because that's exactly what I was thinking too. So we got to break down the ages now. So the Kali Yuga started in 700 BC. It ended in 1700 BC. In between every single age, there's a 200-year transitory period. The age of the Kali Yuga, the age of authority, the age of hierarchy, and the age of delusion. Okay. The theme of the Dwapara Yuga, the next age, is the age of individuality, sovereignty, and ideological communities. Society starts breaking down. People start creating communities based on ideology. But the last one is the age of energy. So we're at the beginning phases of understanding energy. Great example, electricity, quantum physics. Even better example, you and I are made out of energy, and what can we do with that? So we're at the beginning of that. So what also happens with the individuality at the beginning of this age, by the time this age is over, which is hundreds of years from now, we master being an individual. But in the beginning, we start seeing a little bit of kickback because our individuality kind of goes hand in hand with our ego, and people fight for the individuality even when they don't really need to, and it actually goes against the collective good, right? So that is exactly what happens in the beginning. And what I would say to that is that it's probably going to happen right in the beginning, but what will happen eventually as we continue to move forward with this sovereignty is we'll eventually master it. I don't know how long it's going to take, but at this point, we're kind of in the learning phases of what it means to be a sovereign being and how to be connected to the collective good, how to support others and to work with others, but also be an individual. That is the balance that we need to find, because humans, we tend to react and we tend to go on extremes. We're on one side or the other. So how do we embrace both of them? And this goes to the whole concept of singularity versus duality. Singularity is the oneness. Duality is the experience of polar opposites, right? What I feel our goal is on this planet is to embody the singularity while we exist in a world of duality. And if we embody the singularity, we come from a place of balance. And part of not having those situations like you outlined is doing the collective work, working on our traumas. Why do we react? What is our emotional triggers? What happened to me as a child? All these different things that we bring to the surface and start healing will get us to a point that we can be sovereign beings without having the ego get involved.
Can we help others, or are we just on our own path in terms of how things go? Because sometimes I was just reading somebody's comment today that they're all upset that they can't change the world or whatever. And then you hear a lot of the spiritual teachers basically saying, no, yours is a silent path. Yours is to get your thing and be the example. So where do you come down on that?
So I'm a walking paradox because I believe in both, right? But at the same time, like I do really go with that you cannot truly love and give unless you truly love and give to yourself. And then, religions and belief systems has made it that it's almost selfish to do that. So we can help others, but you really can unconditionally help others without expectations, without reacting to them, unless you've done that work that makes it like that. How can you give unconditionally without the expectation if they change or not? Because a lot of people who haven't done their own inner work, say your family, for example, you're like, you want your family to change, you haven't done the inner work, and you're just like, well, this is what's happening. Look what they're doing to us. Look at the conspiracy that's going on with all these things in the world. You need to change, right? That kind of response will only probably get that kind of reaction back to you where people aren't really ready to accept and understand it. So if you do your own inner work and you come to a place of peace and you're able to explain it from a place of peace, you give them the opportunity to really understand what you're saying. However, with that being said, you can never change anybody. People need to do it themselves. You don't know what kind of work that they've done themselves. You don't know if their purpose on earth this time is to awaken like that. So all you can do is give information unconditionally without expectation, and then just let people be and have their own experience about it. That's how I feel.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I have the same thing where we struggle to do it. And yet that's why God created pain, because usually people won't move until it all falls apart. Like we have a situation now where, it's 50-50. I mean, there's 50 on this side, 50. You can't vote in Congress to go to the bathroom. I mean, they can't do anything. And you wonder, how do you move? Because people are moving into their own corners. And that's where this sort of, it has to sort of fall apart before it builds up again, where we're sort of thinking that, so I sort of agree with you. And that's it's a hard thing to live with. But the idea that in the end you die by yourself and you you don't get judged with everybody else. You just get judged as to, you know, how you did and what you did, and that you plan to come in. And that's basically what I say to people, is that you planned to come into the world probably for some reason. And all you got to do is figure out what you're supposed to be doing. And it really doesn't matter what anybody else is doing, because, you know, it's your purpose to come in. You didn't, you know, you just do what you can. And so I appreciate what you're doing, because you're doing an awful lot of material. Let's talk about some of the stuff that's coming up for you, because you have a lot of people. Talk about the following that you have, the number of you know, people that you get huge numbers at events. So you've sort of reached out there and you're getting the word out.
Yes. So some of the upcoming events going on is well, every year that passes, I feel like we get more ambitious with our productions, you know, because definitely connecting with more people and collaboration, because I really believe in collaboration over competition. The energy of inclusion is much more solid of a frequency than that of exclusion. The elite that know the information we know, extraterrestrials, and you go deep into this awareness in your past with all the things that they know, they come from the energy of secrecy and exclusion. We're coming from the fact that it's for everyone. So that vibration in itself, I feel, is what we need in order to move forward within humanity. So as every year passes, I bring on more and more people, and I start producing events, because I create 110 events a year. That's not even including my podcast and free YouTube shows. And within that, now I have certain people that I'm working with that help me co-produce events, like the annual Hybrids Conference, which is a 2-day event every year on hybrid extraterrestrials, the annual Starseed Summit, the annual Walk-ins Conference, which is a 2-day event every year on walk-ins, right? And then there's another 5 or 6 that are co-productions like that. This year, I've started a series with my good friend Sharaya Dharma, in which I'm doing an ancient civilization every single year. Because I used to do true world history conferences, right? True world history, meaning just like a bunch of amazing historians and alternative historians on what our true history is. But now, after years of doing this work and getting such a huge following, I'm able to do specific topics all day. So we just did ancient Sumer and Mesopotamia conference last week. So all day, 10-hour event just on Sumerian scriptures and Mesopotamia. And next weekend, this coming weekend, I don't know if you know Robert Edward Grant, but he's a really great pyramid awareness guy in ancient Egypt. The Hurtaks, Paul Wallace, and William Henry, and a few others. We're doing Ancient Egypt and the Extraterrestrial Connection online conference. And that's going to be a 10-hour event on March 5th. And then we also have, I'm just jumping all over the place, then I'll tell you about some upcoming ones. A part of my Ancient Civilization series is a 2-day event in June called the Indus Valley Civilization and Ancient India Online Conference. 2 days, 10 to 12 hours a day of literally like the last 50,000 years of subcontinent Indian history, right? From scriptures to migration routes to why is it that half of the Indian gods are the exact same gods as Greece gods? Zeus is Indra, Athena is Saraswati. Everything about them is the same. Their background, their upbringing, both of them come from mountains. You know, so that kind of exploration, really going deep into the connections, and that goes to my original purpose of creating Portal to Ascension, to find the root of everything, where we all came from. And part of that is the root of all religion, because if you track these religions back to original source, you see that we were like within the same tribes, and then something happened where the tribes split off, and they took the pantheon of gods to different places, right? So that one I'm extremely excited about, because as you probably know, I'm Indian. So I've always wanted to know what my own roots are. And as I've been exploring my own roots, all I found is that there's so many controversial topics within that because of racism and white supremacy, that when people start talking about the migration routes of India and how we connected to Greece, there's a lot of people that get very angry very quickly, because they think that if you're saying this theory, that means you are pro-Aryan and you're saying that we only became civilized because of the white man. If you believe this theory, then you are kind of proving that everything came from India and nothing came out of Africa. So I'm just rambling here just about some thoughts. But so in this conference, this 2-day conference, we're going to explore every theory that we can get our hands on in order to really kind of decipher what happened in that area of India.
Wow.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And then let me talk about a few more. So William Henry, Awakening the Pearl 2-day workshop. He's doing his online event, his annual event that's in person. He's doing it online on April 23rd, April 24th. This weekend, I am doing on Saturday, that's tomorrow, I'm doing my galactic origins, dimensions, and black holes. And this presentation is a 3-hour presentation that eventually ends in the galactic story and the seeding of humanity. But the whole of it before that is breaking down dimensions, frequencies, the theories behind time travel. And a huge part is introducing you to the Milky Way galaxy, how the Milky Way galaxy rotates, how solar system is within that, what happens to our solar system in different positions within our galaxy, what the real distance is from the black hole in the center of our galaxy. And then also all these anomalies of what's occurring in our galaxy that you may have not have realized. For example, that we've been colliding with a galaxy called the Sagittarius Dwarf Galaxy for over 2 billion years. And that galaxy could actually be where Earth and our solar system originated from, and then got absorbed into Milky Way. So that's going to be tomorrow. It's a very profound presentation.
You're doing that for a presentation?
Yeah, I'm doing that. Mm-hmm.
Wow. You're as smart as Jimmy Blanchette.
Basically, it's my like this. I've always wanted to do a galactic origins presentation, but I'm so linear minded as well and scientific oriented. I wanted to provide a lot of science behind our Milky Way and our galaxy to kind of funnel us into the story about galactic origins to give it more credibility. So after I do all of that information, then I spend 30 minutes going through government documents, a lot of which that you showcased, basically proving that this is a reality. And then the last 30 minutes is all the esoteric information of the Lyrians, the Sirians, the Pleiadians, the fractalization from source and all of that, basically to lead up to that information. Wow. Yeah, it's going to be cool. Then we have mysticism and indigenous healing, which is next weekend as well. We have Marina Seren, who I'm not sure if you connected with her yet, but Alan's been doing a lot with her. She's doing a workshop called Make Contact with Extraterrestrials, which are basically tools and techniques to contact ET life. And she's a hybrid that has been in communication with many different ET races. She's only 21 years old. Give me an idea
which kind of contact modality she uses, because I'm...
Here, let me see if I can find it on this page. And if you want, if you can't attend the event live, I'll give you the replay too, because it would probably be really beneficial for your research. But she's an upcoming person in this community that is just like, she's from Spain, and she's just known about her life and her past lives and the ET lives for the last 5 years or so, since she was like 17, 16.
Wow.
So it doesn't say the tools here. It says how to develop discernment in your navigation towards ET contact, how to identify and let go of what might be blocking you from contact, guide on how to be a diplomat in an encounter or contact experience, what to expect in an encounter, and tools to manifest ET contact. That's what that one's about.
Incredible.
Yeah. And then I'll just mention a couple more here, because the best way, everybody, to find out what we're doing is go to portaltoascension.org, online events. There's a bunch of events lined up there. And if you want, you can just go to our website, sign up, portaltoascension.org, sign up right there, and you immediately get access to 3,000 hours of free presentations, right? And it's sorted by speaker. Grant is on there as well, and sorted by speaker and topic, hundreds of different topics, and you can really kind of get a feel for what we're doing here. And then I'll just mention one other one. Oh, this one's cool, and you like this one, brother. So as you know, I'm into ETs and UFOs. But I've always wanted to do one on people that knew about ET races, and they could talk about planets and the technology of ET planets. So I'm doing one called Extraterrestrial Races, Planets and Technology. And that's going to be on March 26th. And I'll tell you who's on it, because you know some of these people. Dan Winter, he's going to talk about theoretical physics, in which we can basically use what we're doing right now on Earth in order to be able to do things that we know will eventually take us to other planets. Geraldine Orozco, who's going to talk about DNA hybridization, the science behind it. Phil Gruber, who's going to talk about the root races. Barbara Lamb, who's going to talk about people that have had ET experiences, incarnations. Mary Rodwell is going to talk about the children and their experiences as different beings on different planets. Joan of Angels is co-hosting with me. Jenna Layden, she's going to talk about 30 different ET races and where they're from in a galaxy. And then Adam Apollo and Alan Steinfeld. So that's going to be an incredible event as well.
Yeah, that'd be interesting, because I'm just coming out with a book called the UFO Sky Pilots. I deal with the 36 people who have flown the craft. And it's almost like Barbara Lamb got, she had the experience where they said, listen carefully, you're going to be doing this, as if she was set there. And Mary Rodwell got all the kids with the that can speak light language and stuff like that. And I got all the people who fly the flying saucers. So I've got that book will be out shortly. So
these are military officials.
No, these are experiencers. Chris Bledsoe. I do have one U.S. Air Force retired colonel out of L.A. that came after we did an event at Orange County. And he wasn't at the lecture, but he came to that dinner after, and they said, David, tell Grant about you flying the flying saucer. I said, you flew it? He said, yeah, it was a dream. I said, everything's just a dream. Tell me. And he went through the whole thing. I've got a 747 United Airlines pilot, just piles of people that all basically came to me. And it's all started with the consciousness thing. When I gave the consciousness lecture, there was a woman in Phoenix, Arizona, where they set me up with her. I thought she was totally crazy when she told me she's like in her 70s that she was flying the craft. I said, come on. Like, wow. Come on. Like, and then suddenly all these people started coming to me one after another. Melinda Leslie had a couple that she had dealt with. And it's kind of a unique sort of thing. Almost like I was the one who was supposed to put it out. So it didn't take me very long. I just put all these people together. It's an interesting development in terms of the technology and where we're going with this. Hopefully it's used for the right purposes and not for building bombs. Although I even looking at the present situation with the war, I mean, if even you had big, huge flying saucers, what are you going to do? I mean, there's nothing you can really do now. You lost a war against Stone Age tribe, and it doesn't matter what kind of technology you have anymore. The world's a different place. You really can't, in many ways, you can't use that technology. Unless you're really going to go to war, but people aren't going to do that anymore.
Are you talking about like reverse engineered technology utilized for war?
Yeah, well, I think that's where they're going with it. I mean, that's where you get, the whole PTSA thing. They're not interested, because I asked a number of people on the circuit, like, for example, Chris Bledsoe's got 15,000 videos and photographs. I said, did they contact you for your videos? Because they're saying, oh, we need these videos, we need all this data and stuff. No, they didn't contact me. And then I interviewed Deborah Cabell, who was this from the Intruders. She's behind the book Intruders. Okay. And her file was actually sold to Bigelow from John Carpenter. So I said, did they talk to you? Nope, didn't talk to me. So they're basically dealing with military people, because they can't use people's files, like personal files. You can't spy on American people, but that's basically where they're going. I mean, that's why they were at Skinwalker Ranch. They're not interested in UFOs. They were interested in, how do you put bulls inside trailers? How do you make stuff disappear and reappear and all this kind of stuff? And they're looking at the military applications of this stuff. And it's like the same as remote viewing. They didn't really care whether it worked or not. The thing was it operational? Can we use it for military purposes? Right. Otherwise, we're not interested in it.
Yeah. So it's all about weaponization. And that goes to, when Tom DeLonge first came out, my first thing was, why aren't they talking about who's driving these vehicles and exclusively skipping over to the technology?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what you shifted to as well. You shifted into really being about the experiencer, because that's where the conversation really needs to be at, is what's going on and what does this mean for the grand scheme of who we are on this planet? Yeah,
that's where I think it all comes down to. I'm even just about to do a little PowerPoint where I deal with now I'm going to forget her name, Ingrid. She's works for NASA and the Navy, and she had a near-death experience when she's 3 years old. And what she described, she says she was there and she fell into a pool of water and drowned, and her mother pulled her out and whatever. But she said, I suddenly realized I could go anywhere instantaneously. I was in the maid's room. Then I saw my mother, and then I saw this dog. I said, oh, look at the dog. Boom. She was instantly with the dog. And then she saw this park. Oh, she was instantly at the park. And that's exactly what Chris Bledsoe said. Chris Bledsoe said, the way it works when he's flying the craft, he says, you look at a cloud, and you look at the cloud and you say, I'd like to go to the cloud. And the cloud is suddenly right at you. It's like it comes to you. And it's this idea. Ron Johnson was another experience I talked to, where they said, where would you like to go? He said, I'd like to see the Milky Way from a distance. They said, hang on. Wow. He said, it was less than 1 second. He said, looked out the window and saw the Milky Way from a distance. Yes. And that's this whole thing. When you see the near-death experience literature and the out-of-body experience literature, it's the same thing. People are describing 360-degree vision. Or Ron Johnson, when he was in the, he was talking about the being, Elby is the being that he was dealing with, took him to see his mother in the spirit world 3 times. And the third time he could actually see her, and his mother's taking him for a tour of the spirit world. And he goes to this sort of like looks like a temple, a Mormon temple at Nephi Utah. And he said, I went into the building. He said, his mother said, when you come, you're going to get a room in building like this. I have a room. Your father has a room, whatever. And he said, I walked in, he said it was like 10 or 100 times the size inside the building it was as outside. I said, wow. That's exactly what Chris Bledsoe said. Yeah. That's exactly what Terry Lovelace said about inside the craft. Yep, so the thing is, are you in a craft? Are you in the spirit world? And you start to realize that's the important part. It's not the technology. It's like, what happens at death? Where did we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going? That's what's the important part.
And that goes with non-locality, right? The whole theory of quantum physics is that one piece of information can be accessed anywhere in the universe. So our consciousness is non-local as well. And Ray Hernandez talks a lot about this, so that when you get into that state, that astral state, that spirit state, all things exist in the same moment. So you can just basically, and I feel, because I'm really interested in the technology of how they get here, right? And from the nuts and bolts to light ships and all those things. But I've heard some experiences talk about the technology where they can just dematerialize and just relocate in specific areas in the solar system, because their consciousness is at such a level that distance isn't even within their reality. It's all happening at the same time in one moment, in one place. And all you have to do is just reprogram your consciousness to go to wherever you need to go.
Yeah, that's what this girl that works for, she's an oceanographer, PhD. That's what she said. When she was in the experience, time and space completely disappeared. Yeah. And so the question is, if time and space doesn't exist, then how big is the universe? Is there actually planets out there in far away in space through, and takes a long time? Or if there's no time and space, it's what she said, it's all here, it's all now, it's all the same thing. And it's this idea that it may be just a point in space, a singularity, and it's all happening within. Or people will describe when they have near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences, they're going within. They're not, and near-death experiences, they're going within. Or when you have your out-of-body experience, and you've dealt with hundreds of them, but when you look back and see your body, you can see your brain. You are an activity inside your consciousness, your awareness. Right. And that's when you start to look at this whole thing and look past the UFO stuff and start looking at the near-death experience and the out-of-body experience, you start to realize this thing is not what people think it is. And that's what this Ingrid said. She was told nothing that you see is what is really there. It's all, and it's this idea, is it a simulated universe? Does time and space exist? And it's just so much more complex that people sort of want. People want, we want, give me the engine, let's make some money, let's, have some technology, whatever. And it's just so much more complex than that. And I think that's where your role and my role is very important, is you move people past that and start presenting this other stuff. And you don't present it and say, this is the way it is. You just say, well, what about this? And then people think, oh, well, that's, and they start to think, and that's what maybe changes things. And then it comes down to what Max Planck says, the funeral, one funeral at a time, is that the young kids, that the older people wouldn't believe this kind of stuff, but the young kids, when they say, is there teleportation? They go, well, of course there is, like they're just used to it. So the old generation dies off and the new generation isn't offended with the idea, and it becomes adopted.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's so beautifully said. And that's what we're moving towards, is just this understanding that we're all frequency and vibration and all things are possible. But my question is, do you think it could be both? That we have, because it's almost like a computer program, like a video game, right? Say that we create a video game, and in that video game, we're in space, and it takes you a certain amount of time to travel from one planet to another planet in that video game. But ultimately, that video game is just ones and zeros and frequency and code. So it's like when you're in that game, you can play the game of distance and traveling in time.
Yeah.
But then when you transcend it, out of body experiences, near-death experiences, psychedelics, meditation, whatever, or even contact the experiences, you transcend that. So who are we to even know if that transcendence is the true reality, or if that's even another fractalization from what really is going on?
Yeah.
So to me, it's kind of like both realities exist, because this is real to me, right? So I got to go, I have to walk down to the grocery store if I want to get some food. So that's as real as this is. But when we transcend that, we have a different perspective.
Yeah. But still, it's still an activity inside consciousness. So when you die, you suddenly go, oh, and that's what people will say. And probably half the people that speak at your conferences will say, the basic concept is realize who you actually are. You've got to remember who you actually are. We are not the actor on the stage. We are playing an actor on the stage. And that's a big difference, where we sort of, and yes, it's very real. The same as this girl, she said the same thing. She said she happened when she was just before she was 3 years old. She said it was as more real than the real world. And so if that dream is more real than the real world, or that experience, then what is this? I mean, because people will talk about that all the time, psychedelics or out about experience and stuff, that you're in the dream. And so it becomes this idea that it's all manifestation, or as Deepak Chopra says, everything's an activity inside consciousness.
Right.
And the Maya idea, from the Indian culture, that, it's magic. And I didn't even realize when I wrote the book called Managing Magic, I sort of understood that what the CIA and all these people were dealing with was magic. It wasn't just UFOs, because they had the weird desk and they were looking at paranormal phenomena and they were looking at all this other stuff. And so I call it Managing Magic. Little did I know that Maya is the Sanskrit word for magic. And so this is the whole idea, is that we have these experiences and they are as real, but then we sort of, and I had the idea that those experiences aren't real. They're just as real as these experiences. And that's what people will come back and tell you. It just, to me, I always say, like, when I look at it, and I've done it for 46 years or whatever, and to me, the more I look at it, the more it looks like it gets more complex and more complex and more complex, that it's got to be at least 1,000 times more complex than people think it is. And it's just, you start to see the magnificence of the world, of the universe, of even, 100 trillion atoms making up a cell that has 3.2 billion base pairs that are programmed, and people are saying it's all happening by accident. It's like, give your head a shake. I mean, it's just so complex, and so everything's got consciousness. Everything knows, every little subatomic particle inside the cell knows what it's going to do, and the cell knows what it's going to do inside the body. And there's 330 billion cells die in your body every day, and we don't really give a shit. It's only when suddenly the ego cell is going to die, then it's like, oh my God, like, what are we going to do now? And we don't realize that there's 200 different cells, and 330 billion a day are being replaced and dying and stuff. And it's this massive process and this intelligence that's running this whole operation. We just take it for granted because it's unconscious.
Yes. Oh my God. So well said. So let me ask you this then: as we all collectively move to this understanding of known locality, that time is not what, is not linear, but it's actually beyond that, not even secular, but doesn't even exist, right? Secular is even just another construct of it all. So do you feel we can get to a point where we can navigate this matrix and have certain powers where we're able to dematerialize, rematerialize, levitate, all these different types of things that we see in ancient scriptures, once we actually collectively get to a point of transcending this reality, but still exists within our bodies?
Sure. Because if you go back to the idea, everything is Maya, everything is illusion, everything is vibration, then if you understand the source code, you can do it. As Jesus said, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible. And this again, I go back to this because I've been listening to this girlfriend the last couple of days. Ingrid talked about the fact where she was in a situation where she was with her boyfriend and robbed her boyfriend, and she disappeared. And her boyfriend said, "You weren't here. I'm glad you weren't here." And she said, "I wasn't here." "No, you weren't here when this thing happened." And she asked she's dealing with energy beings, and she has this idea, everything is energy, everything is beings. And the idea that you can turn into an alien or a human or whatever you want to do, you can take on a form, but your basic source. And she said to them, and they basically said to the same thing, you've got to realize everything is possible. And because it's all made out of consciousness. And that's where I've changed. Even in the last year, I now sort of believe God did not create the heaven and the earth. That is a materialistic Christian idea, that God created this material physical world, and then he put little souls in each one. And the idea is God created the sparks of the divine, and everything's made out of consciousness. And you and I are the ones creating the universe. We create the universe. Or if you've had Mark, I don't know if you have Mark Sims, if you talk to him, the being that comes to him and talks about these 15 levels, that you start as, something very simple, and you go up. And when you're finished, when you get to this 15th level, you're creating galaxies. There are entities creating galaxies. That's a Michael Newton idea. I was fascinated with Michael Newton for years about this idea that we go, and all it is everybody's making the universe a bigger place and a more magnificent place. And we're just building all the time. And so we have to look in the long term in terms of not what are we going to do in this lifetime, or can we get, because being, the Western society, we want everything yesterday. and realizing that this goes on forever. Or people will say, I want to escape the karmic wheel. I want to, just get out there, whatever. And it's like, what are you going to do? Sit on a beach for the next 3 billion years and drink Mai Tais? Come on. I mean, everybody's building. That's what it's all about. I mean, what is God going to take off and say, okay, I've had enough. I'm going to, everybody, and that's the whole concept of altruism, that's what the beings are doing. They're helping us, and we're supposed to help the people below us and do what we're supposed to do. And it's not about rape, pillage, kill, and steal. It's about trying to make the world a better place.
Yes. So from some experiences that I've worked with, and even more than that, channelers and other people, I've come to an understanding that every sentient being wants to create something in its own image. That as soon as you get that spark of sentience, and so when we say the Elohim created us, right, which is from Sumerian scriptures, when we say the Lyran seeded us, but if you keep going beyond that, the original source was the same thing. Source wanted to create something in its own image, and it's even in our own Bibles now. So I feel that that's what we're doing as humans, is we are creating in our image, and in our image happens to be computers, happens to be artificial intelligence, robots, and everything is neutral until depending on the conscious level we're at. So we can utilize it in a positive way or a negative way. Yeah. But even if you look at a hard drive, what is a hard drive? We've literally created a dimension with information in it that's only wires and electricity, but it has data and Word documents, So we are creating in our image at the dimension that we're able to do it at. So interesting.
Yeah. And when you start looking at the ET thing, I always point out, 1896, the crash in Texas, where, and there was the airships flying around and they had propellers and sails and whatever. And they said, we're from Mars. And people went, oh, that makes sense. And you see that it's almost like they're transitioning from one type of being to another, or the Greys didn't appear till 1961, the reptilians till 1988. And you start seeing this idea, it's just that it's unfolding, and that we create the good, and we also create the good and the bad. So whatever you have that's very negative, you got to realize you're part of what you're creating. This whole concept that we always have this victim idea, that we're here and these things are attacking us, whatever, to us, and realizing that we are the ones that are building the universe. We are the ones that are responsible. And even if it's not true, if you take responsibility for where you are, you're going to make better decisions than if you see yourself as a victim.
Yeah. Yeah. And since we have this, we're living within these limited bandwidth frequency that, we can see certain frequency, we can hear a certain frequency range, smell only certain frequencies. It makes sense that there's probably so many more experiences beyond that we need to be open to the fact that we could have chose to have many of these experiences that we're actually victimizing ourselves to now because of our limited perception. We're not able to see the grand picture of why this is happening or what we called into our life before we incarnated.
Yeah. And a lot of people that have the near-death experience or the, near-death experience will realize that. They'll go, this was all intentional, that, I saw myself as a victim in the accident or whatever. Or there's this Nathan Castle, who he has these dreams. He's a Dominican priest who gets these dreams. He's written 3 books on helping people cross over to the other side. And this whole idea where they come and they see themselves as victims, but when they're on the other side, then they realize what was actually going on was that this was all intentional, and you're going to live another life, and you're just cycling through. And like everything else, because we want to live forever, but we realize that it's all life and death, it's all cycling. That's how the universe works. And then if you realize you're part of this overall process, instead of the ego where it's all about me and what I'm here for or whatever, then we start to make some progress. And so I think we're in a situation, even if you look at 100 years ago, we're in a situation where we're way ahead of the game. I mean, I point out, even 100 years ago, we thought everything was solid. It wasn't until 1911 that we run the gold foil experiment and realized that it was all 99.99999% space. We are at this point now, we're starting to realize this non-locality and spooky action at a distance and all this kind of stuff. And then when you talk to people that have these near-death experiences and say, I was here and I wanted to go there and I was instantly there, that's non-locality. That's this whole spooky action at a distance, where they're saying, oh, it only happens with electrons. No, it happens with people too. And you start to realize that these people that are the contactees are the people that probably have the answers. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just using your rational analytical brain and reshuffling around a bunch of material that you're getting conditioned from school or whatever. It's these people are bringing the new material in, or even where Gary Nolan talks about, where the guy that's doing the DNA stuff on the experiencers and the metal research, whatever at Stanford. He said it's the stuff that you want to look at is the 5% that's outside the curve. That when you see the 5% that doesn't make any sense, that's what you got to watch. And that's what the experiencers are telling us. They're telling us this weird stuff that when you start looking at it, actually starts to make sense as to what's actually going on.
Right. And we're just at the beginning phases of this understanding right now. However, we're seeing craft doing things that we're in the beginning phases of. So if that craft is being reverse engineered in black budget programs or gets released to the public, things that we're theorizing in quantum physics laboratory can take our technology hundreds, if not thousands of years into the future. Right. And they have actually, so as you probably know, Newtonian physics and quantum physics are paradoxical to each other. Newtonian physics, but however, quantum world creates Newtonian world. So it's like, how does that make sense? And so they were able to do things like, double slit experiment where two particles show up in the same place at different places at the same time. So it's almost like bilocation, right? And teleportation on the subatomic level. So they weren't able to do that anything above an atom until 2 years ago. They did something 100 times the size of a hydrogen atom. They teleported it from one place to another place. So what does this mean? We have finally cracked the code of being able to do things in the subatomic world in the Newtonian world. So if we're just at the beginning phases of that, if we linearly progress, we'll eventually get to doing it with spacecraft, doing it with human bodies, like Star Trek, But I feel that we could get even further into the future if we have this disclosure of all this technology that's out there.
Yeah, we have to have it open, because otherwise all they're going to do is use it to strip the leaves off the trees twice as fast as we're doing it right now.
Yeah,
I mean, it's who's going to run the who's going to be in control of this material. That's the part that scares me. Is that people are all big on this disclosure thing with the Congress and that sort of stuff, but they got to realize that's all military. They're not going to investigate civilian people. They're not going to, if there's suddenly the message, they know the message. And I believe they know a lot of the stuff. Like, it's been around every nuclear silo. I've been at a nuclear silo and talked to an experiencer who told me what happened in a nuclear silo. When you see that, are they going to tell you that they're telling us to shut the nukes down? Are they going to tell us to quit polluting the planet? Are they? They're not going to tell any of that stuff. There's no way, because it's not in their vested interest. They just want this technology, and that's where I think we may be a little bit off the track. Is that we're sort of relying on military people to give us disclosure. And if you see what's happened so far, they haven't told us a thing. We have not learned a single thing from.
But they have hijacked the movement.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. So, and they've got money now. Now they're all making, instead of, they've got a few bucks. Now they're all making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to work on this thing. Because that's maybe what they did is they couldn't figure it out in the black world. They couldn't crack this stuff. And so they needed the white world. So they put it sort of into the white world. And then all these people started contributing stuff, and the black world picks up on it, because you know what it's like in the black world. It's all so compartmentalized. Nobody knows what's going on. You got a piece of this, you got a piece of that. Nobody's talking to each other. And that's what they keep saying, is that they were not able to back engineer stuff, because that is this consciousness interface to it. So they need to put it into the white world to get the white world scientists to give them the ideas, but they're never going to release it. It's all classified. Even with Dr. Eric Walker, the first book I ever wrote, Dr. Eric Walker said to us, we were saying, come on, you're an old man, tell us what's going on, because he knew what was going on. And he said, look, why should we change the rules to satisfy your curiosity? You're just curious. Admit it. You're just curious. You're never going to learn. Give it up. You're never going to get the answer. And that's this whole idea, this mentality they have, is you just keep paying taxes. You just keep your thing, and we're going to use this. We're going to save the country, and we've got this stuff, and everybody's got suitcases full of money and stuff like that. That's what I sort of see is the risk of what's going on now, is that really nothing has been released. We heard this report, and they said it's all classified. All 144 cases were classified, and it's all in the black world. We didn't learn anything, and yet they now got a pile of money, and a lot of people are jumping on board with the Galileo project and all these things, and they're contributing all this material. And I guarantee you, the black world people are sitting there just scooping up all the material and seeing, somebody's going to give us material that we need to solve this problem.
Wow. Yeah, I know. It's just so. A lot of people are really wanted disclosure to happen so much so that they're jumping on the whole military disclosure thing, and a completely, friends and colleagues of ours that are really into it. And it's because we waited for so long that now that we're getting just like a few breadcrumbs, people are jumping on it, but it's just suspicious from the beginning. Like, the whole, and as you said, just being military. And even when Tom DeLonge came out and he had that panel of people in his live stream on Twitter, all of them just happened to have left their jobs 1 to 7 days earlier.
Yeah, yeah.
As if like, because they can't do that unless they're not working from there. But it was so obvious that it was almost like a complete ploy in order to basically be able to release this. But they were coming across like they're civilians now, and they just wanted the information out, right?
Yeah. And that's part of, I actually have a book, the Obama UFO files. I'm just waiting for the FOIs. The book is finished except for the FOIs. I found all the stuff on all the different times Obama talked about it and stuff like that. And I actually go through you're exactly right. That's exactly how it happened. The whole Tom DeLonge thing was that it was all orchestrated. For example, Hillary Clinton was the first to bring up UAPs fall of 2015. She wanted to bring it on the Kimmel show, and he didn't ask her the question. And you see all this sort of stuff. And that when Lou Elizondo resigned, he resigned in the morning. The meeting with the New York Times with Hal Puthoff, New York Times, Leslie Kean, Jim Semivan, all those people took place in the afternoon. You got to be retired. You can't be in the government. So it's so obvious. And they're doing that, I guess, because if you're a military guy, that's your world, and you're thinking you're saving the world. Everybody thinks they're saving the world, but I think that's where we have the thing where I bring up this stuff, whereas there's this huge spiritual component that the basic question is life after death. Where did we come from? Where are we going? Because this is all just an illusion. This is all just a video game. This is all just a sort of a thing. And because we're so in the UFO field, we're like the Rodney Dangerfield of all sciences. So we don't get any respect, and people will do anything to get respect.
So funny.
And they did just jump on this thing, and you're going like, come on, folks. I mean, and that's okay if they want. Everybody has their belief, but when you ignore the experiencers who are actually the ones with the answers, that's the part that I see that is my role, is to say, do you know what this person said? Do you know what this person said? Do you know that these people are moving through space instantaneously? And I've got like not one person, I got 36 people, and they're all telling the same stories, and they're all basically telling you that this thing is this non-local, and it's all consciousness, and that's why they can't move the craft, because it has a consciousness interface, and you can't turn it on unless you got the consciousness interface, and it's flown by. That's how the people will say, when you ask them, like this David guy, I said, okay, tell me your story. He said, oh, I think it's a dream. I said, tell me your story anyway. So he starts telling me the story. It's like they're reading off a cue card. I went in the craft. The craft was bigger on the inside than it was outside. There was some beings, and they said, go ahead and do it. I put my hand on a panel. They put their hand on a ball. They put their hand on something, and the craft was alive. It was absolutely alive. They became one with the craft, and whatever they thought is what the craft did. Everybody says the same thing. Nobody has said anything different. And you start hearing that, and you realize this is, I don't care if you call it anecdotal evidence. This is very strong evidence that shows this is all going to be consciousness when you break it all down. There's a physical component, but the physical component is one that gets us in trouble of war and the male ego and, the urinating contests and stuff like that. Yeah,
exactly. And like, since we've been talking about near-death experiences, let me do another plug for another event we got going on. We're actually doing an event on April 3rd called Psychology, Evidence, and Science Behind Near-Death Experiences and After-Death Communication. And that's a free event on Portal to Ascension. It's a 10-hour event all day with some amazing people, doctors, nurses, some scientists, therapists, and experiencers of near-death. But what's happening now is actually near-death experiences are actually being considered by the mainstream. Yale University came out with a whole research study on it just last year. And on CBS, there was this whole entire segment on NDEs. And I think they said, it was like, let me think. I think it was 1 out of every 10 or 1 out of every 5 near-death experiences, or 1 out of every experience of somebody passing away and then coming back to life in a hospital setting is a near-death experience where they remember other things, they visit someplace, and they see themselves outside of their body. And that was on CBS, right? Yeah. So it's becoming proven now that consciousness isn't just constricted within the brain, that it's actually a field that's outside of our body as well.
Yeah, I think that's where our disclosure comes. It's not that we're going to convince anybody. It's you put it out. Because I remember I wrote an article called The 64 Reasons That Decided Not to Tell You the Truth. And one of them was Stephen Greer's thing that the stock market would melt down if they ever announced the fact that they were actually working on this stuff. Right. And I used to believe that as well. And then what happened when the New York Times thing came out? Nothing. nobody panicked, nobody jumped out of a window. And that's what's kind of happening now, is that you and I tell stories, we keep telling the stories, and the young kids all go, oh, you near-death experience, I've heard about that. And I was in the 70s when it first started. I actually wrote a paper. When I started, I wrote a paper at the university on people dying. And because it was a big thing then, and I went, and did people ever predict their deaths? Stuff like this, near-death experiences, and all the weird things that happen around death, and people coming to take them across and stuff like that. And now it's going to be the same thing, almost like gay marriage or any of these sort of things. We are no different than any other social or political movement. We're going to keep talking about it, and people are going to hear it, and they're going to go, I don't really have interest in that stuff. And then someone's going to say, oh, it's real. There are near-death experiences people do, and everybody's going, yeah, I knew that. Right. It's the same as the New York Times article.
Yeah.
That's how things disclose. It's not going to be a move where suddenly everybody's going to panic and the story's going to be announced. It's a thing that gradually happens, and everybody's just going to suddenly accept it. And it's happened numerous times in history.
Right. And the same thing with extraterrestrials, right? And UFOs is that. And what do you think about the whole concept of that, this was coming out no matter what? And people like you, myself, many other people we know were pushing it to come out. Even Steve Bassett was doing a lot of things that, really put up a flag with Congress members and people who weren't even in the awareness of this all. And then all of a sudden they came in, they took over and hijacked the movement. Do you think that they maybe did that because they knew it was inevitable that was coming out and that they needed to get in front of the story?
I think there could be a component to that you're trying to get ahead of the story before it breaks. But I think what a lot of it was, Jim Semivan actually said that they were behind this. That's why I wrote up in the Obama book, was that there was guys inside the government. So people always think, like, I worked at a university which was government, and everybody thinks, well, every year in the government, what's going on. No, you don't. There's like a million different departments, and everybody's fighting for money, and you only know what your little job is. You don't know what your boss does. You don't know what people all around you do. And so you had people inside the government who were very frustrated, and Semivan was one of them. He had the experience in the 1990s with his wife, and the beings were in the room, and so he couldn't deny this thing. He knew, and he's, what's going on? He's asking. And so you had people in the government who were just upset. And he actually said, they went to the government and they said, we are going to drop this thing. And he went to high level intelligence. He tells the story. He went to high level intelligence, said, we're going to drop this thing. And they said, okay, fine, whatever. And they forced it out. But it was interested people. That's why they were tired. So they were interested people who wanted the answer out. So they sort of forced it out. And but still the majority of the government, I think, doesn't really know. The black ops people that may know something are holding their stuff, but the vast majority of the government doesn't know anything. So I'll give credit to, like, John Podesta was one that was big behind this. He's the one that came up with the UAP. He fed Hillary Clinton the questions and met with these generals and stuff like that. And they were going to drop this thing, as I told in, well, the book I didn't publish, but I told this, I was being told in 2016, they are going to drop this thing. Chris Bledsoe was telling me this. He said, the big man's going to appear on 60 Minutes, exactly what they did 4 years later. Mm-hmm. And he said, they're going to, high level people are going to come forward and they're going to say UFOs exist. And they're going to do it. This is 2016, but because Hillary lost the election, they had to postpone it for another 9 months. But it was these people that were all retired, all were interested in pushing this thing out, that moved it. And then everything has sort of moved along. And we've gotten to this point where it's out in the open now. I give them credit for that. And it's just whether we or the military control what actually goes on from here on in. And I think we still control it, because they're not going to look at experiences. They're not interested in what experiencers say and that sort of thing. They're just interested in the military stuff. And the ETs have said that numerous times. If you go down the hardware route, you're in a trap. It's not about that. It's about understanding, how does reality work? What's really going on? And this understanding that everything is made out of consciousness. The material world may be an illusion. It's a dense sort of form of consciousness, and we're creating it. And that kind of stuff. Even Jim Semivan said, can you go public with that kind of stuff? Where you actually say to people, and he may use the same argument. Oh, they go back to their priests and what are we going to do now? I don't think any of that's going to happen. They're going to go, yeah, okay, whatever. I got to take my kid to soccer practice. I don't care. Most people don't care. It's going to be just generally accepted. But that's what saves us, is the fact that we understand the disclosure is to tell people who you actually are.
Right.
Who is your true essence. And that's what's going to change the world, where people are going to realize, oh, I'm not just here to rape, pillage, kill, and steal. I'm actually here to do something. I'm actually, there's something, and that's what changes the consciousness.
More to it.
And I think we're pretty close to that now, thanks to what you're doing and what other people are doing. I think that mentality is already there. If you ask little kids, they'll accept all the stuff we're talking about. They no question at all. It's the old guys that are hanging on because they spent, $50,000 a year to go to MIT, and they simply don't want to know that they wasted their time and they got to take the cyanide pill. Those are the secular scientists, I think, that are going to be most shocked by this whole thing, because they're going to realize that all the stuff they were putting out was basically wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And we're just at the beginning phases. That's why I'm hopeful. A lot of things are unfolding, and I feel that we're going to be moving into a world that we are going to realize we're the creators of the reality. And the more we are aware that we're the creators of the reality, more we do it intentionally. And as we do it intentionally, we can be in a peaceful world where we treat each other with respect and compassion, and we take care of the planet instead of destroying it. Yeah, that's what it's all about.
Because we all came here for a reason, and it was a good reason that we wanted to help. We wanted to play the game or whatever. And when we suddenly realized why we came here and the fact that we are here for a reason, everything changes. Everything will shift. And I think that's where we got to go, that you and I are doing the job that we probably intended to do. And it doesn't really matter whether it happens, 2 years after we die or whatever, but we were part of the biggest story of all times. It's like if this, Dolores Cannon thing, the call went out, and we said, yeah, well, we'll go in there. We'll do that. Sure. Send me in, and that gives you the idea that, and people will all realize that we aren't who we think we are. And that it's a very spiritual, even I said the UFO thing, when I conclude it all, it's going to be a lot less physical than people think. It's going to be way more spiritual than people think. And that's going to really piss some people off. And it's going to be 1,000 times more complex. And I say it will not have even a hint of capitalism. It'll be this idea where everybody's, working on a purpose, and it's not physical and stuff like that. So that's where I've seen, and I've come a long way from 1975 and with, the UFOs and stuff. And you see them, they're leading you slowly. It's not like they land on the White House lawn and tell you what to do. We're here to bring you freedom and democracy, Jesus and McDonald's. They're just, they're doing it slowly, and they're taking people, and we've agreed to come in and do this. We made these agreements. We come in, we put the stuff out, and gradually it moves along. And they may have done this on 1,000 planets before. They know exactly how to move people to the next step and open this thing up. And I think it's because you start seeing this, and you talk to people, you'll ask people who have the experiences, did they get you to write the book? I always ask this question. Did they get you to write the book? Yeah, they kind of got me to write the book. And you hear this, it's like, or they won't leave the people alone. They won't let them sleep until they write it down, or they talk. And you hear these sort of stories, is that these people have made an agreement and they've forgotten why they made the agreement. Or even Sherry Wild, who you probably had on, where she was fighting with them, and she said, I'm not going to do this anymore. Sherry, have you forgotten the promise that you made? And that was the book was called The Forgotten Promise. You made a promise to do this. And so let's go. And people are sort of motivated. And so I feel honored to be working with you and other people that we're on a team. We may have had a meeting before we came in and said, okay, this is what we're going to do. Yeah. And you do this and I'll do that. And it gives you a sense of purpose and a sense that you're doing what you came to do. And there's no better feeling in the world than believing that you're actually helping.
Yes, exactly. I mean, I'm having the time of my life doing what I do. It's really fun. It's exciting. And I'm a very curious person. And it's just unfolding layers of who we are as humans, right? Yeah. And even beyond that, who we are as galactic beings.
The curiosity is a big part as well. I always said it was always like a chess game, because I was very good at playing chess when I was a little kid. I probably could have become pretty good at chess, but I didn't want to lose. So I stopped playing chess. And but to me, it was always like a chess game. It's like, you're sitting there watching the board, and this piece moves, that piece moves, and you don't move a piece until you know why that piece moved. And I'm just trying to figure out, okay, what's going on here? And you're just trying to figure it out like a chess game. I've got, sort of no vested interest. I'm not trying to get anything. I'm just trying to figure this thing out. And it's like, it's like an exciting thing where you're curious. And when you, especially when you make a discovery, you can probably confirm this, that when you get a download or you get a discovery where you go, yeah, that guy, I figured it out. It's like,
the pieces are coming together.
And there's no better feeling in the world where you suddenly, like the aha moment where it's like, seriously. Wow. And you hear people like Tesla, you know, where he has the alternating engine, or people when they have that moment where they just like exhilarated and they run back and they're trying to write it down and they're just like on this stage. And so that's where I think, you know, it may be us giving us the ideas, as you mentioned before, this idea that you get to a certain point when you get to the level where you're at the veil is very thin and you pop through, like you mentioned some, but the one I always, because I wrote a whole chapter in a book called Inspired. I went the whole thing about Inspired, where do people get ideas? I wrote a whole chapter on this whole thing about the inventions that all came at the same time. And the one was the telephone that Graham Bell filed in the morning, as a woman filed the same patent in the afternoon. And people don't realize there were these things were all happening at the same time, and you get to this level. So it's not until you get to the level that you break through, that they allow you to break through, and everybody's breaking through at the same time. And we're at this understanding now about non-locality, spooky action at a distance, consciousness. Because I tell a story. When I did the 2012 consciousness thing, when I had that download, I remember Jerry Pippin, who was a very famous interview at the time, said, "Grant, I cannot believe you've done this. I cannot believe you have given up the presidents and the United States and gone to this woo-woo stuff." And I said, "Well, Jerry, I didn't really go there. I got kind of teleported there." And nobody was talking consciousness. Nobody in the UFO community except Colin Andrews was talking consciousness. And now it's like even the people who don't believe in consciousness use it because they know it's a buzzword. You better use this word. And people are starting, it's the shift in 10 years since I had that download. The shift in consciousness understanding in the UFO community is absolutely massive. Totally.
Yeah, and I know some like linear ufologists, if you can call them that have taken the shift into consciousness as of late as well. Yeah.
And yet I still think a lot of them don't understand. They just realize that there's some sort of component there. There's some sort of thing, but they really don't understand the true essence of the thing, that it's going to be all consciousness. That's where you're not going to see the government people go. That's where we got to go, because they're just simply not going to say, guess what? It's not the world you think it is. Although there's a lot, you even see the thing with the whole, simulated universe and Donald Hoffman and, all this sort of stuff. There's piles of these people now coming forward. Robert Lanza, they're all writing these books. And these are top scientist people who are basically talking about this illusion idea that consciousness is primary and matter is a derivative of consciousness, not the other way around. And you start seeing this shift. And that's only in the last couple of years. So I think we're moving pretty fast. And we'll see where it goes. That's the only thing I think that really saves the world, is that everybody comes to realize who they actually are.
Yeah.
We are not Americans, Canadians. We are individuals who have come, and you're going to play this role this time. You're going to play that role the next time. You're going to play this, this race, that race, this religion, that religion, and we are all one. And that, to me, absolutely is the number one rule of the number one message, is oneness and understanding who you are. We are all one, and there's no division.
Seriously. And even through mathematics now and science, we can prove our interconnectivity, right?
Yeah.
So we've already mentioned many different things within quantum physics that proves, like, for example, that our intention and attention on something has a different outcome than when we don't have our intention on it, which is a quantum physics thing. That basically, if a tree falls in the wood, does it make a sound? Well, if it's a subatomic tree, it doesn't. Like when we put our attention to it, it's almost like we literally create reality by focusing on reality, right? It's been proven scientifically. So, and it's been called quantum theory for quite some time. But in my book, these studies and these tests have kind of proven that this is a reality. So it's just taken a period of time for us to shift from this Newtonian linear understanding to really make this quantum world the new understanding, the foundation that we move forward with. And as you said, the next generation, it's already their foundation. So what happens as we progress, we just continue to evolve. And I like the way you put it, that it doesn't have to be one big impact. We just slowly evolve, and it's not even that slowly. It's like in a decade, everything's different, and the different components that are embedded in our new in education become the foundation of what we understand in our future, right? And that's what's happening.
Even Paul Selig talked about, because he's done the 10 channeling books, and not one word has changed except for the odd one where there's an S or he mispronounced something or something like that. But he does the 10 books. And he said that if you look at his channeling material, they never talk about science. And so he asked them, and they said, in 100 years, none of the words you use in science will be used anymore. It's all going to be about vibration and stuff like this. That even the language of science is going to change, and we don't realize it because it's happening. We're in the present moment. We don't realize. But if you look back at what even 30, I don't know if you were there when the internet happened, but I remember before the internet, when we used to research with writing letters back and forth, where you sit there and wait 2 weeks for an answer and stuff like that. People have no clue how fast things are changing in the world. And so you get the idea of the internet being the collective. And actually, I've written a book about this as well. I call it the helping hand, the 11 things that were given to us. And one of them was the computer, that if you look at the computer, they mentioned computer, it was like literally a download in 1950 to one guy sitting there. And then all the people doing LSD. It was all invented at Silicon Valley because they were doing the LSD there, and all that stuff was downloaded. All the stuff for the computer. You look at how all the stuff, and you look at it. Is this the collective unconscious? Was this given to us to help us understand the Akashic record, and you start to realize it's all consciousness and it's all connected. That there is no computer, there's no internet. It's just connecting consciousness together. Until there's a consciousness to program the computer, or a consciousness to put the material on, or a consciousness reading it, it's just connecting all these consciousness together. And you start to think like, wow, maybe this was all planned beforehand, and it's all unraveling as according to a plan that may have been done 1,000 times before on other planets.
And it is interesting because the internet is like a third dimensional Akashic records, and it has information from this dimension, but it also has people like us speaking about information from other dimensions. So it's basically us creating something in our image, our own version of the Akashic records, in order to disseminate information to the collective. Yeah.
And the only thing we need now on top of that is what you get with I want to do a panel on people who've had not near-death experiences, but the life review. Because in the life review, they show one of these things, almost like the flying saucer, when people flying the flying saucer. I said, the reason that story is important, because if you're going to make up a story about being on a craft, that's not something you're going to stick in the story. I flew the flying saucer. Nobody's going to believe that. That's like the limit case for credulity. If you can believe that, you can believe anything. I mean, what can't you believe? And the same thing happens with the life review, that the people all describe, not only do they see their life in every single detail, they see it from a third perspective of the person that they influence, and how that influenced their family, and how that influenced the kids, and the ripple effect all the way through. And when you see the Akashic record where it's all linked to that sort of stuff, you go like, wow. I mean, you just unbelievable complex. How does that all be put together? It's just unbelievable.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah. So let's maybe shut her down, and I need some poems here.
Oh yeah, I forgot all about that.
Give me a little bit of background on how you started this, because it's called slam poetry, right?
Yeah. So basically, spoken word slam poetry used to be performance-based competition poetry. That's what it used to be, competing with people in the spoken word phrase. But now, as time has progressed, slam poetry is now developed into the form of actually presenting it, which is like, it's kind of like hip hop meets poetry. Wow. And then ins and outs, and slam literally meaning that there's certain parts that slam and really resonate with you. So the way it started was 2000, 2001. I was writing poetry when I was 16 in 1998, but it was just like super just poems, like Where the Dead and the Dying Lay, like about World War II, things like that, right? And then when I went to college at 18 in 2000 at Cal State Fullerton, I started researching the root of all religion, and I started writing kind of sci-fi-like spoken word pieces, planets, black holes, ETs. Wasn't aware of any of this stuff yet. And about a year later, I started getting introduced to Nassim Haramein, Jordan Maxwell, William Henry, Jim Self. And then I started like really diving deep into spirituality and the Sumerian scriptures and the root of it all. Some of my first spoken word pieces were on the Anunnaki and Nibiru and the Sumerian tablets. And then I was getting deep into extraterrestrial awareness, consciousness, soon to get into UFO disclosure. So it can continue to progress. But most of them, if not all of my poems, really had the spiritual component, because it was about who are we? What is our placement in the universe? Why are we here? So I speak a lot about galactic things, galactic beings, extraterrestrials, wormholes, black holes, but it's always about the eventual goal for ascension, right? So even I have things split up. Like I have an album called Intergalactic Album, which is like, I have it open right now, which is 6 songs specifically on ascension in regards to our intergalactic connection, right? Wow. And I have like an album on astral travel, which is just a bunch of songs on astral traveling and to different dimensions and astral traveling to Earth. I have one on planet Earth, which is literally just songs about incarnating on Earth, the cycles of time, having these different experiences, and why we're here on this planet in the first place. So since then, from then until now, I've created probably over 2,000 spoken word pieces. And then I was also into freestyle hip hop. So in 2001, 2002, I was a freestyle hip hop artist. Like, so freestyle is basically off the top of my head, rapping to beats, right? So I'd be rapping about, consciousness and ETs. And then that progressed into spoken word. And then I came back to hip hop around 6-7 years ago. And now I'm actively creating songs that are hip hop songs that are going to be on albums coming up in the near future. So that's everything in one right there.
How do you have time in the day for all the stuff you do?
Well, these songs come to me within seconds. It takes me a minute sometimes to write these songs. My number one song that you've heard many times, and you filmed me on stage at the Portal Ascension conference. Remember that?
Yeah.
That one was the first spoken word piece I ever performed in 2008. And I actually wrote it on a plane going to England, and it took me about 3 minutes to write the whole thing. And it's an epic ballad. And thank God for the phone, I was just like writing it on the phone really quick. So
unbelievable. I have to update you. I have to update my Tuned In book, because I do a whole thing in Tuned In about the number of songs that came in under 5 minutes and how many came spontaneous. And you'd fit right in there. You could be a whole chapter, because that's hilarious. That's pretty common with musicians, where they ask them where to come from. Or Neil Young, where'd you get Blowing in the Wind? He goes, yeah, I don't really know. That wellspring of creativity, I guess, it's like came in under 10 minutes, stories and they were always the best song. Maybe you can confirm this. They always said it was never the B-side song. It was always the most famous song that they wrote was one of these weird things like Let It Be or with the Mother Mary thing. That was, big song. And that was a dream that he had and stuff like that. It's always the big song. It's never a B-side song. It's their most famous song that comes in this very inspired way.
Damn. Yeah. Remember you did the whole presentation on Portal to Ascension too. The music one. I watched that like 3 times. Yeah.
And it works well for me because I'm not a musician. So people can't say I got a vested interest. I could care less about music. So I'm just so fascinated with the idea. It's like, how did this happen? How does this happen instantaneously? Yeah. You realize that maybe that's what it is. When I hear that you get these stuff sort of spontaneously, then you realize there is a field that the information, and I believe the information in the field is more accurate than the information in the conscious world. And the ability is to find you and the experiencers and people who have tapped into the field, who are getting the material. And that's where you're going to get the answers. It's coming out of the field where all the material is stored.
Yes, exactly. When you step out of the way, like I've had times where I've tried to write music.
Yeah.
As letting the inspiration come. And then I've cultivated now an ability to go into a studio and write and still step out of the way and get into that flow state in a controlled environment, and that's after 20 years of writing. It took me quite a while to get to that point where like, because normally I would have like months where I would write like 1 to 2 songs a day. Right. And then I would go like 4 or 5 months of not even writing because I would not do it unless I'm inspired. And then now I'm at a point where I feel like I'm directly connected, that I could just like, if I wanted to, I could put on a beat right now and just close my eyes and then something will just come out.
Wow. Yeah. And that is the way it works. Like in the Inspired book, I talked about that inspired principle, is that you'd get guys who are working on a problem, like the hologram was one and the laser was the other one, and they worked on it, they couldn't get it, and then they went, and both of them were sitting on park benches watching. One was waiting for a restaurant to open, and the other was watching a tennis game, and they sat down on the park bench and relaxed, and all of a sudden, boom, the idea came in their head, and they were racing back to the lab to write it down. It's that moment of getting out of the way that allows the veil to open. Or trauma is another one.
Yes.
You have a near-death experience, a head injury or whatever, and that rips the field, and you're in the field and you bring the stuff back. So
yeah. And I know a lot of people that are poets that only can write when they're sad. So it's like when you're at that deep emotional state, right? I know a lot of people like that actually. And then they'd have writer's block, and we'd have conversations about it because I know lots of poets. And then there would be like, they would have writer's block when their life was good, because like when they're sad, they got that deep emotion and then they're reflecting on their position, not only in their life, but their position in the universe. What am I? What is going on right now? That depressive state almost. So I'm blessed to be able to write even when I'm actually happy. But you could tell some of these poems, like some of my old school ones, when I was kind of sad and depressed, it was like, why are we here on this planet? Why are we running around like rats? You know, that kind of feeling.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to do this. Okay, so this first poem here is called Fragmentation. And this is about basically the fractalization from source. So it goes into three parts. It's the void, the darkness, and the light.
Wow.
Here we go, fragmentation. In the beginning, there were no words, no concept, no winning, no place, no time, no description, no label, and no finishing, until awareness became conscious of itself. Separation from the source, no east, no west, no south or north. Not to mention there never existed a dimension or ascension or physical lessons, except for the 0 point. There was no Christ to anoint. Singularity, energy, frequency raised vibrationally, paradoxically into limitation of what only the five senses can see. No linearity, no anarchy, no galaxies, no nebulae. No jobs, no nature, no materialism, and no political lies, until darkness finally fragmented from the light, using free will to see through the night, the darkness. I take the anxiety pill full of fright, in my bed insecure from the conspiracy that might take over my mind, control me with a chip inside, scared and full of fear. That is the reason why we are here. To the star system of Arcturus I stare and recite my cosmic prayers. Self-empowered, the fabric of victim consciousness I tear. The light. You see, the destination has already been chosen. It's the journey that counts. Every day we transcend, no doubt, living in the now, realizing it's all a projection of a co-creation of our own subconscious mind, channel energy through the heart, remembrance of the divine, take apart my ego and restart my life in any moment. I'm going home, traveling across the black intergalactic ocean, took the psychedelic potion, and now I'm awoken. To the streets we take the spoken word. Fly high, levitate the God inside. I'm free like a bird, cosmic oneness integrating in my being, a full spectrum being, in alignment with the purity confined in, ranges of frequencies inhibit what we are seeing. I shift what I choose to believe in, fuel my light body for the ether I'm fiending.
Wow.
Fragmentation.
That is so profound. Unbelievable.
All right. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I just there's something about when you do poetry, it's just like, oh, wow. It's just like, just mesmerized by, and the message is there, and it's got to be coming from source. I mean, it's just wonderful stuff.
Thank you, brother. All right, so I'll do like a few more here.
Yep.
3 more. Okay. So this one's called Time Has Slowed Down. Time slowing down. Time has slowed down, or is that perception of the now, creating ripples, overcoming obstacles, abundance flows, the end is close, which only means there's a new beginning, spinning like a black hole's event horizon as my chakra points awaken and widen, a solar flare that inspires all men and women to inhale the ether into each of their pores inside of the physical, cells that rely on oxygen and a natural amount of rest. I will forever rhyme until I take my last breath. I said time has slowed down, or is that perception of how we exist in a matrix of disavowed humans searching for the next cash cow? I'm the sacred cow, worshipped at the top of the mount, spinning around, milk and honey to those who hear the sound as your chakra points awaken and your soul is found. Sun gaze to receive praise from this maze we find ourselves in, to the collective cellular membrane ancestry passed down to your kin, DNA strands that unwind and bend and dissipate upon death. I will forever rhyme until I take my last breath.
That's beautiful.
Okay, this one's called The Source. The tunnel shines bright light of frequencies, quantum realities that I step into by breathing the ether, starbursts from the galactic center, disperse newly recycled matter to the ends of the galaxy, where resides all of humanity. Looked at from a distance, this infinity symbolizes consistency, everlasting mentality, consciousness gravitationally inclined. We see so many stars in front of our eyes, gives the black hole its disguise, pulls us closer to the origin, slowly because we just begun the cycle once again. It's time to begin this cycle once again. The tunnel shines bright light of spirituality, descended from interdimensional energy. Love is the only thing we hold as reality, but egotistically drawn to fight struggles, find a balance and juggle my higher and lower selves, destruction, corruption. Through sin, we observe the infinite end of a universe within. Love for myself has allowed me to befriend all in existence. We all came from the stars, Aryan bloodlines from Mars. We do not have to travel far to find the balance within, so we may love ourselves and all other creatures and humans. And this one's a good one to end it on because it's called Rejoin the Galactic Federation. All right. And then there was one. Life untangled, rhymers undone. Life source drained, vanity explained. Following those with fame, always fight and complain. Answer remains the same. Control with borders and tamed, locked up and enslaved, riding the quantum wave through awareness. We are saved. Ascend and fade away or live for today and don't play games or get erased from this place. One face. Unity of race. Consciousness explained, end of human reigns, galactic alliance remains our true cosmic place amongst the stars in space, aware now in case reincarnation takes my next life away. So ascend and pray, not for monetary gains, but an escape from superficial ways. Life is just a phase that will one day be replaced by pure energy and an entirely new intergalactic race.
Wow. You are a symbol of creativity and inspiration. Wow.
Thanks, brother.
I wish I had known all this before I did the book Inspired, because I would have put it in there and tuned in, because those were the books that's what I was doing in those books, is exactly what I see with you. Is this just, you go like, wow, how is this happening? Almost like the technology, whatever, is something going on there that's not normal. And if you can figure out what it is, it's going to be very helpful for mankind. So I appreciate you doing that. And for me, because it's, I'm a big fan of your poetry, and I can't say enough about it. So we'll
thank you.
Promote it out there. So again, let's, and I'm supposed to be speaking at one of the conferences. Which one is that?
So Portal to Ascension Conference, April 15, 16, 17. It's the 3-day annual one. Yeah. And I know you're not traveling, but in 2023, we're doing a live conference. So just throwing it out there, if you're going to travel in 2023.
Well, we'll see. We still have the trouble with the Homeland Security guys that
I know, right?
Are playing their game of stay out of our country. But anyway, we'll see what happens. But these are the big conferences. So let's end with that. These are the ones that go for days, and I don't know how you sit there for that many sessions, but it goes on day after day after day. And these are all the ones that are online are basically a donation site. And so go through a little bit about that and who might be
at that one coming up.
Yeah.
All right, I'll pull it up really quick here. All right, so the Portal to Ascension conference we did in 2018, 2019 live, and Grant was at both of them in Irvine. And then since then, we've done it online. The first one that we did during the world situation was 5 days, which was intense. And that actually, after doing 5 days, I realized I don't want to do another 5-day conference because I was drained. You know, the adrenaline that you need in order to be present for 5 days.
Yeah.
Imagine the crash from that on the 6th day. That's what I experienced, you know?
Yeah, that's right. I couldn't figure out how you do that.
So now it's 3 days. It was 4 days and now it's 3 days. And this is April 15th to 17th. And we have 33 presenters. We have 7 MCs. It's 3 days. And I'll just mention a few people who will be there. Sheila Seppi, who I work with quite often, walk-ins and hybrids. Deborah Giusti is doing the Ascension panel. Of course, Grant Cameron's going to be there. Carolyn Corey, Sharaya Dharma. We have Dr. Charnel. This is a full range awareness event. Consciousness, nutrition, vibrational therapy, extraterrestrials, UFOs, like it's just Portal to Ascension. Why do I call myself the platform Portal to Ascension? Because all things are within it. If we're ascending right now, every single thing is a part of this. So it's a really fully encompassing event. We have Mary Rodwell's going to be there. Robert Schwartz, who is a researcher on near-death experiencers. We have Valerie Tinghini, who's a new presenter who talks about Kundalini. We have sound healers such as Vox Angeles, Stephanie Redfeather, Geraldine Orozco, Phil Gruber, Elizabeth April, who's become pretty well known the last few years. She's going to be there. Flo Karuna, who's has something called Starseed Codes on Instagram, does a lot of awareness for starseeds. We have a few different sound practitioners. Shima Moore is going to be doing astrology. Sandra Walter will be there. And also another individual named Paul Moreland, who goes by Blue Pill on Instagram, that's also new to the circuit of speaking. So there's going to be a good, half the people are going to be people that, we've worked with before, but this is also an event to introduce people to a lot of new people especially a lot of people that actually became really blossomed during the last 2 years because everything went online and they started sharing their content. So I'm now having an opportunity to feature many new people as well. So it's going to be a fun event. 3 days, 2 panels. We have the panel on Ascension, then we have an Experiencer ET UFO panel on Sunday. And if you're free for that, Grant, I'll let you know an email. Come to that panel too. Sure. And then it's going to be 10 to 11 hours a day, just nonstop back-to-back awareness. And the whole intention for the event is to infuse this timeline with consciousness, you know, so it's going to be exciting. Wow. Everybody gets unlimited replay access. You can sign up on our website to go to the Zoom room or youtube.com/portal to ascension to watch it on YouTube.
Wow. You just amaze me. I guess one more last question is, with the COVID thing and everybody going to Zoom, has that actually worked to your benefit?
Yes. So,
because you were the only guy really doing this, and then suddenly everybody was forced to go and do this.
You know the right questions to ask, because all right, so I'd been on Zoom for 5 years and I'd already created an online university. So when everything happened, my attendance went up 3 to 5 times per event. Wow. And then and they haven't stopped, and it continues to grow. And then also a lot of organizations that did their conferences live, like the International Near-Death Conference, Ancient History Conferences, they all had to go online. But instead of doing it online themselves, they came to me and I started doing their events. For example, MUFON, I've been doing all the MUFON Orange County events for the last month, year and a half online. Wow. So like, I think you might've spoke at one of them in the last year and a half.
Yeah. Orange County, I did. Yeah.
So that was on Portal to Ascension. I think we connected there. And so like, I've been able to help a lot of organizations that would have gone out of business or would have just not done their event for 2 years by moving it to Portal to Ascension and producing it for them. So that's also assisted with my overall business plan and creating a lot of collaborations too.
Yeah. And you already had the base, you had the numbers and stuff and the contacts and stuff. So
yep.
Beautiful. Thank you, Neil. I appreciate very much. And anytime you need me to chip in with a presentation on stuff, because I have a whole series of books coming out here, and willing to help you. And appreciate what you've done for me and what you've done for the community and for the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Okay. We'll be in touch.
All right, brother. Okay.